Hello, friends. Today we're going to discuss Chapter 1, Living World, Adaptations and Classification. So, as the first heading goes, let's recall in what ways is the diversity the living beings are. So, basically, we see a variety of plants and animals everywhere. So, as it is mentioned, some plants grow in water hyacinth, some are to be found in deserts. Cactus. Some plants are found only in the snowy regions. Devdar. Some plants cannot be seen without a microscope. Algae, and some are huge in size. The largest plant has a trunk big enough to allow a car. You can Google that up. Animals, some are unicellular. Example I can give is bacteria, though they are not animals, and others multicellular. We, the humans, some are vertebrate. We humans, the pigeon, the sparrows, crows, whereas others are invertebrates. The example I can give is cockroach, mosquitoes, earthworms, and the world is full of variety of animals: aquatic, terrestrial, amphibian, reptilian, aerial, etc. Subheading: Can you tell? Are the plants and animals from Kashmir and Rajasthan of the same type? Okay, let me not go to as far away places as Kashmir or Rajasthan. Let me go closer home, Maharashtra, and compare two places within Maharashtra, Mumbai and Nagpur. Both these places have a really different weather. It floods a lot in Mumbai. It does not flood in Nagpur. Mumbai is humid most of the time. Nagpur is dry. So even in the same places, there can be different weather, different species. So answering the question, on coniferous trees like pine and Devdar trees and pine trees might, if you have ever been to Uttarakhand, Devdar trees are really common there. However, the deserts of Rajasthan, plants like cactus and acacia are to be found. Babool, from where I come from, babool is a very common plant which is used for teeth. For brushing teeth, people use babool traditionally. So, let's come to the main point. What is adaptation? The book defines adaptation as gradual changes occur in the body parts and also in the behavior of organisms, which helps them to adjust to their surroundings. Such changes are called adaptations. The most important thing, they take place over a long period of time. It's not like that today, if the weather has changed, then animals will be able to adjust suddenly. No. Lots of plants and animals have died, and the ones we see today survive because they adapted. For example, let's take the evolution of appendix. Appendix was had a traditional use in humans when we used to eat raw. For example, raw vegetables, raw meat. So that cellulose part digestion was digested in appendix. We humans used to have appendix A few animals that eat grass, for example, cows, they still have a very large appendix to digest cellulose. But as human discovered fire, so we did not have the use to digest cellulose because as we cook, the cellulose is destroyed. So gradually and gradually, the appendix size reduced. And nowadays, the appendix is a very small part of the digestive system. This is what is adaptation. Gradual changes occur in body part. The appendix didn't grow from large to small all of a sudden. It grew smaller, slower. And also in the behavior of organisms. Personally, eating cooked food wouldn't count as a behavioral change. But in this case, yes, which helps them to adjust to their surroundings. Such changes are called adaptations. I hope that is clear. So, that table, let me help by completing the one for cactus. Habitat, desert. Type of roots. Cactus traditionally has roots which are very deep to take in water. It is traditionally fibrous. Characteristics of leaves. In cactus, the leaf is very small and pointy so that it does not transpire. I'll discuss that when the time comes. Characteristics of stem. It's green and fleshy to enable photosynthesis. So, subheading adaptation in aquatic plants. So, that experiment is to visit water bodies such as river, brook, pond, lake, and our surroundings. Basically, a brook is a stream. In some cases where river is too small, it can be called a brook. But generally, rivers are big. For example, Godavari is a river because it's quite big. Brook much smaller. Okay, so generally there is difference in between these two plants. River and brook are flowing. The water never stays constant. In pond and lake, the water is stagnant. It does not move. So the plants and animals that have evolved even for these two places will be different. So as we see, some of the aquatic plants are firmly rooted in the soil at the bottom of the water bodies. So basically, if I zoom into the picture, you see there are mainly two types of plants. One, that have their roots inside water and are completely underground. Two, the ones that float on water and don't have any sort of relation with the ground. And three, which have roots in the ground, but some part of them floats. Okay? Their stems are submerged while leaves and plants float in the water. This is this one, which I was talking about till here. However, some plants are entirely afloat. Their roots are not anchored in soil. This kind of plants. The surface of stem and leaves of many aquatic plants are covered with waxy layers. Why? What is the need of waxy layer? Suppose there is a leaf cell, and it has surrounded by water from all sides. This is water. If the layer is not present, the water will eventually swell up the leaves, entering in it. Remember what happens if we place our hand in water? They tend to swell up. Similarly, if there is no waxy layer, the leaves tend to swell up. So In order to avoid this swelling, the surface is covered with a waxy layer. Wax, as you know, avoids water. Leaves of some aquatic plants are thin and slender like a ribbon. Why? The explanation is given here only. This shape helps them to withstand fast currents of water. So basically, what is more likely to float in water? A hard big leaf like this, stem like this, or a thin place like this. Naturally, the later one can flow with water and plants can adjust. Air spaces in stems and petioles, aquatic plants are useful for floating in water. Let us again take a case. Here I have a rubber tube which has no air inside it. With no air inside it, rubber, which is heavier than water, sink. However, when I add air to it and it is floating, here, which is surrounded by water. So basically what happens is there is air above the water. Air is lighter than water, hence it floats. So this is the reason they have air spaces to allow them to float. For example, look at the lotus stalk. It has air in it. So now some of the answers to use your brain power. 1. Why does water trickle off lotus leaf? Because, as I said, they have a waxy layer and wax tends to remove the water. 2. Why don't leaves of these plants rot in water? Again, as I said, the wax doesn't allow the water to enter. Hence, these leaves are protected and they do not rot. Why are their roots short and fibrous? Okay, the roots are short because they have to float in water. So long roots, which tend to float more, have no apparent purpose in it. And fibrous. Traditionally, this has been the taproot. One root with a lot of branches in it. And traditionally, that is how we have been describing fibrous root. So, the fibrous roots, as you can see, they are thinner and they can flow with the water. And by contrast, tap roots, which are thicker, they tend to be resistant, they tend to resist the flow of water. So, that is why the roots are short and fibrous. Now, before I begin, let me give a little background. Okay? Here is a leaf. Traditionally, what happens is when the leaves have to make their food, they tend to remove water. The water leaves the leaves. And for typically any plant, much of its water is used in this process. That is why in hot days we have to water the plants more, because the leaves tend to give off the water as water vapors. Okay. So with this bit of background, take two potted plants, one a cactus and the other a leafy plant. Tie plastic bags loosely around the leaves. So coming back, What happens in plastic bag is, this is the plastic bag, the water vapors as they collide with it, they cannot leave, so they are turned to liquid. You see some liquid droplets there. Okay. Around these plants and keep them in sunlight from early in the morning. As I said, when plants are making their food, that is in the day, so they tend to lose water, and bring these pots into the classroom and observe them. Has the same quantity of water collected in both the bag? The answer would be no. The desert plant would have lesser water compared to a normal plant. You may ask, why? If, as I zoom it into the diagram, you see that the thorns you traditionally see are the modified leaves. The leaves are too small. So, even if I cover it with a plastic bag, these leaves leave little water. Why? We will look. Desert plants are either leafless or the leaves are like small needles or have been modified into thorns. As a result, they lose little vapor by evaporation. Evaporation primarily depends on the surface of the leaf. The more the surface is exposed to the atmosphere, the more will be the water lost. So, when the area is less, thorns have a very less area. Less area means less water. The stems stores water and food and is thereby fleshy. Okay. Now, the one thing that separates the desert plant is the stem are green as they perform photosynthesis in the absence of leaves. Now, you may ask, if the stem is performing photosynthesis, if the stem performs photosynthesis, then won't it lose water? The answer is given next. Their roots penetrate deep into the soil in the search of water. Suppose this is the plant, and typically in desert there is a scarcity of water. So for a typical plant, if the roots are till here, for desert plants these roots extend deep, much deeper, and they are much more in number. You don't know where there can be water issues. And what avoids loss of water is, there is a thick layer of waxy substance on the stems of these plants too. Now again, as I said, wax in aquatic plants, wax did not allow water to come in. In desert plants, it does not allow the water to go out. Hence, they are able to conserve water. Adaptation in snowy regions. Can you tell? In what way are sloping branches useful to the plant in snowy region? Now let's take an example again. Take this shape, take this shape. Now it rains. Which shape is more likely to repel the water? Naturally, as you see, as the water enters, I'll change the color. The water tends to go down. That is, it does not accumulate. Whereas in this case, a puddle of water is formed here, then it is repelled. Similarly is the case in snowy regions. If it snows too much, then the snow accumulates on the plants. This is not a tree would like. So what they do? These trees are conical in shapes due to their sloping branches. Okay? In the heavy snowfall or extreme cold, their conical shape prevents the snow from accumulating on the tree. As I've showed you, conical structures would stay less, and the thick bark helps the tree to withstand the cold. Thick bark, traditionally, trees do not feel cold the way we do, because if, as you will learn in the later classes, inside the tree, most of the cells perform only support functions. But yes, the thick bark helps the living cell to survive. Heading: Adaptation in the forest region. Okay, now what happens is, in forest there are many varieties of different trees. The trees require sunlight amongst most of the other factors. But in forest what happens is, the tall trees, these are the tall trees, and the shorter trees, this is the forest floor, these do not allow the sunlight. The sunlight is blocked here only. These plants traditionally are left in the dark. There is no sunlight for them. So they have to grow taller and taller to get some sunshine. So a variety of plants, trees, shrubs and herbs are found in forest. These plants compete among themselves for sunlight. Hence, trees grow taller to get sunlight, and climber and vines grow to a great height with the support of this tree. So, even the climbers need sunlight. So, what they do is, I'll give you an example. This is a tree. So, what happens? The climbers encircle the tree. The climbers have no shape. Actually, it would be a 3D structure if I can help it. My drawing is poor. So, this is the tree trunk, and this is the back side. This is encircled, round and round and round. So, the climbers also get some sunlight. Heading: Adaptation in grassland plants. Now, unlike forests which have tall trees, grasslands are wide open plain of grasses. So, there it's not too difficult. Fibrous roots of grasses prevent soil erosion. Very, very important. If grass doesn't grow, grasslands won't survive for long. Grasses in the equatorial region are very tall. How tall, you may ask? Well, that depends. The length is different from African savanna, and in the Indian grasslands, they're different. That depends. Animals like tigers, elephants, and deer can remain hidden in this grass. Okay, maybe not elephants, but yeah, tigers hunt by remaining hidden in the grass. However, grasses in the cold regions are very short. You go to Europe, the higher side, near Ireland maybe, the grasses are really short. Animals like rabbit are found in those grasses. Vast meadows are found in hilly areas as well as plain. So, observe and discuss. Observe and note the adaptations in the parts of plant like potato, groundnut, yam, water hyacinth, aloe, acacia, carrot, onion, beet, bitter gourd, grapevine, etc. So, I'll explain one thing which is common for some of them and which I haven't discussed till now. The roots of some plants store food in it. For example, as the leaf make food, the food has to be stored somewhere. so that when the weather is harsh, the stored food can be used for survival. So what happens is plants like potato, carrot, and radish. These three plants store their food underground. That is why here this, as you can see, the potatoes are underground. Okay. Heading: Adaptation for ingestion of food in plants. Okay, what happens is that not every for photosynthesis we require a compound chlorophyll. Okay, if that is not there, plants cannot photosynthesize. So that is why some are parasitic. Here we have Cuscuta. So as you can see, the green plant is any other plant, the yellow one is Cuscuta. What it does is it has parasites. It is leafless and cannot perform photosynthesis because traditionally, now that's exception, in desert plant stem has chlorophyll, but generally leaves have chlorophyll. However, it has hostorial, which is sucking roots or absorbing nutrients from the host plants. Okay, let me give an example. This is the plant. Here it is the tubes which contain the food. Suppose this is X, this is Y. So what this plant does, its root reach till there. And here they suck the nutrient. Okay. Fungi do not have chlorophyll and cannot perform photosynthesis. Fungus is not a plant to begin with, so they cannot perform photosynthesis. Remember, mushroom is not a plant technically. Okay. They obtain food from starchy foods like bhakri and bread. Now, one thing is plants need nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Now, in some places, particularly if you go near the Bay of Bengal, the Sundarban Delta, these nutrients are deficient. So, they have to cover it. So, how they do is they eat animals, okay, which is deficient in nitrogen, like Drosera, Venus flytrap, pitcher plant. Okay, so actually, I'll just give a broad explanation what happens. So you can see this is an open parasitic plant. Okay, so what happens is the insect, as it lands on, it generates a smell. Insect is generated and it sits here. As you can see, this is the demarcate region I'm talking about. So what happens is, as the insect places its legs there, the chemical is sticky enough. So the insect is trapped. And as soon as the plants detect someone sitting on it, the leaves close immediately and the insect is eaten. So probably this leaf just ate an insect. That is why it is closed tightly. As it chews, it goes on. Now, adaptation in animals. Okay, make a list of animal in your surroundings. Okay, I make for mine. Right now, besides me, I have a sparrow, a mosquito, and an ant going on. Compare the diversity of animals listed by your friends with your list. You do that. Right now, I have no one. Discuss the habitat, food habits, characteristics of body structure like vertebral column, wings, gills, tails. Prepare a chart. Okay, so I, I hope you know what all these things are. What is a vertebral column? What is a wing? What is a gill? What is a tail? Now, comparison. As compared to terrestrial animals, the skin and body shape of aquatic animals appear to undergo changes. Now, a bit of physics. As I go there, this, okay, I should have used a different color. This is water. Okay, so compared to this body is far more likely to tolerate the water flow. The water flows this body can better survive it compared to this body. So hence, as it is written, their body tapers towards both the ends like a spindle. Okay. Fishes breathe with gills instead of a nose. Their eyes have transparent eyelids. Now, why eyelids? We cannot keep our eyes open underwater, right? But fishes can, because their eye, if I would draw it, has an eyelid which covers the eye. This, when the water tries to enter it is repelled. Because the eyelid is closed, water cannot enter the eye. We humans don't have that. Else, even we would have been able to see underwater. But that's an entirely different thing right now. Okay, they have air bladder within the body to help them float. You saw what, as I gave an example of a deflated rubber tube, the rubber tube which has been floated. Now, as they say, observe the body of the frog, duck, and tortoise. Okay, so I'll discuss parallelly. What use are these legs to their animal? For frog, jumping. For duck and tortoise, walking. What helps frog to breathe underwater? Frogs breathe underwater with the help of the skin. What use are the long hind legs of a frog? To jump. Basically, frogs can jump a greater distance because their legs allow them to. Fourth, why doesn't a duck get wet in water? Because they have oil on their feathers. So that is what is mentioned. The duck and frog have webbed toes. They use it like an oars. Water flows off waxy feathers. Okay, hence ducks really don't get wet. Webbed toes, slippery, smooth skin, and a triangular head helps the frog to swim easily through water. They can live in land as well as in water. Okay. Due to their ability to breathe through the skin in water and use the nose and lungs on land. The typical colors of a frog's back help it to hide. So, frogs stay in green areas. The color of a frog, is green. So, they can easily hide. Now, adaptations in forest and grassland animals. Carnivorous animals like the wild dog, fox, tiger, and lion, okay, have strong legs to run fast and capture their prey. Nothing much to explain. They have claws and their canine teeth are sharp and pointed. Okay. What is the function of such teeth? I'll tell you. Basically, they're used to tear the prey. For example, the lions can't cook. they don't have knives. They can't use knives. So what they do is they rip the mass open and then eat it. So this is what canine is used for. Tigers have padded paws. Padded, you may have a pillow. Imagine a pillow, a pillow-like softness in a paw. This enables them to silently stalk their prey. They don't make noise. When you place your hand on a pillow, the pillow doesn't make noise unless it's a special kind of pillow, that is, and capture it easily. The eyes of predatory carnivorous animal are located in front of their head. It helps them to spot a prey. Now what happens is we humans too have eyes on the front of our head. So what we do is we kind of have a 180-degree view. We cannot see what is below us. Okay, it's similar in that case, but the range is slightly bigger for lions. Okay, the eyes of herbivorous are below the forehead on either side of the head. Basically, if I have to give you in terms of angles, we see 180 degree on both sides. Basically, the one side and the other side, which combine 180 degree. For herbivores like deer or black buck, their head structures, their eyes are on side. For example, this is the human eyes where they are placed. So eyes allows us, this is our range of sphere. In case of deers, eyes are placed here. This is their head and eyes are here. This allows them to see this much, a much wider area than we have. Okay, so as I said, this gives them wide angle vision. Okay, their legs are long and tapering with strong hooves, which enable them to run fast, taking long leaps. That's why when someone is excited, we say, "Why are you running like a deer?" Because deers run really fast and they more jump than run. Okay. Their long and freely moving ears can receive sounds from long distance and different directions. Deer and blackbuck have colors that merge with their surroundings. Okay. Their teeth are strong for chewing tough plant materials. Now, adaptation in desert animals. Now, one thing that defines desert, you might be thinking as hot, dry place. In sub-Saharan Africa, if I go, the temperatures reach 50 degrees Celsius in day and as low as 10 degrees Celsius at night. Basically, a huge temperature difference. Okay, so basically, some animals they stay during the day to avoid the sun, and they come out at night when the temperature is tolerable, cold for that matter. Okay, hence desert animals have a thick skin to prevent loss of water from the body. So as you know, we sweat. We sweat because our skin has sweat pores. These sweat pores release water. Okay, so here they have thick skin. It prevents the loss of water. Their legs are long and flat with cushioned sole. Basically, what happens is, let me begin the example. This is sand. Okay, let me use a different color maybe. This is sand. So what will happen? A thing with smaller area sinks in the sand really deep. But the thing with broader area sinks rather less. So hence that's a function of long flat legs with cushioned sole. The nostrils are protected by fold of skin. The eyelashes are long and thick. So for snowy region, we have a thick coat. That is basically common for every being which lives in snow. Okay. So there is a white body, a white or silver body color to blend into the snow. Basically, long thick hair on the skin are typical characterization of animals of snowy regions. Because these thick body hair helps to trap the heat. Basically, as you know, mammals have a constant body temperature and they give out heat continuously. So that hair acts like a blanket. Okay, this keeps them really warm. Adaptation in aerial animals. So remember me giving the example of having slender bodies. The part valid for water is valid for air as well. The slender bodies, they do support less resistance. The spindle shaped body of bird also minimizes the resistance of air while flying with hollow bones. This is very typical bird adaptation. Hollow bones. We humans have bones that are solid from inside. But in birds, the bones are hollow. A body covering of feather, okay, and modification of forelegs into wings. Basically, in humans, our forelegs are hands. The body is light in weight and adapted for flight. The body of insect is also light in weight, okay, and tapers at both the ends. Now, one thing that separates is the insect can fly with 2 pair of wings and also walk with 6 stick-like legs. Imagine a mosquito. Bats. Remember, bats are not birds. Bats are not insects. Bats are flying mammals. So they fly with the help of patagium, a thin fold of skin between their forelegs and hind legs. Okay, basically imagine our hands and legs have something of skin in between. In bats, this is called as patagium. Okay, adaptation in reptiles. One of the adaptation that separates them is scales. Almost every reptile you see will have scales. Okay. So as I mentioned, animals like house lizard, garden lizard, crocodile use the muscle for creeping. Okay. Remember, they show adaptation in skin, soles of feet, body color. Adaptation for food in animal. Though this is discussed in much details later in the chapter of nutrition, they can be herbivores and carnivores. Basically, they are adapted for different kinds of food. Okay, this is the table. You may complete it. Heading: adaptation for blending with the surroundings. Now, to ensure safety, it is sometimes important to blend with the surroundings. So, what happens is the predators cannot spot you. If they cannot spot you, they cannot eat you. Hence, some have adapted to be similar to the surroundings. We have seen an example before. Frogs. Frogs are green in color. The grass in which they live is also green in color. Hence, they have blended with their surroundings. So, it's not easy to spot a frog from the grass or these predators, and they tend to stay safe. Okay. As I said in the starting, adaptation is not a sudden process. As I said, you cannot throw a random terrestrial animal in water and expect it to adapt. It is gradual and continuous. Differences in the structure and appearance of present day animals and plants of thousands of years ago are adaptations that occurred according to prevailing condition. As I said, the one thing that noted is according to prevailing conditions. Had the conditions been different, animals would have evolved differently. It's our duty to conserve this diversity. So, again, Darwin's theory of evolution. So, a bit of Charles Darwin's journey, which may help to understand. Charles Darwin went to Galapagos Island. This is one of the islands. You can check it out. It's still there. And he studied there and observed various plants and animals, and he proposed two principles. One is survival of the fittest. Let me take the case of human. For example, suddenly the weather changes from say to present day 25 degrees Celsius average to minus 25 degrees Celsius. So the humans that can tolerate such temperatures will survive, while rest of all will die. This, as in theory it can be said, organisms are likely to survive which can best adapt themselves to changing environment. This is called survival of the fittest. This is Darwin's first principle. Now humans have survived. So for example, some humans develop furs to keep themselves warm. Some do not. So what happens is, as furs help to keep the body warm, the humans with fur will survive much better than the humans without furs. This is definition is written as, if an organism, in this case human, is born with a new beneficial characteristic, fur, and is able to survive, of course, this change is preserved in the next generation. This is called Darwin's second principle and is called the theory of natural selection. Okay? But remember, natural selection won't come easy, because half of the humans will die to the survival of the fittest, and the ones that survive will have to undergo natural selection to survive in our case of reduced temperatures. Now heading classification of living organism. Okay, as of now we have lakhs of known plants and animals. We can't expect them to study and remember each of them. So in order to remember, we have used classification. Okay, so as they say, a hierarchy that is formed in the classification starts with kingdom Animalia or kingdom Plantae. Further sub and subgroups are formed depending on basic similarities and differences. This is called the hierarchy of classification. For example, let me take a case of humans. Now the order of humans is primate. Okay. Now let's start with kingdom. Okay. We Animalia. So like amoeba. It is also, no, not maybe amoeba. Let me take a case of mosquito. They both are of same kingdom. Okay, but the phylum, maybe we will learn about it in greater detail, but the phylum of mosquito is Arthropoda, while in case of humans it is Chordata. Now let's go to class Mammalia. Mammalia is basically all those animals that give birth, that is, they do not lay eggs. For example, let's consider cows and humans. They both have the same class, but in order they become different. Cows belong to a separate class and humans belong to primates. Now we share the primate kingdom with monkeys, apes, chimpanzees. But again, the family becomes different. Monkeys do not come in the family of Hominidae. The realest relative of human is chimpanzee. Okay, the genus is Homo, species is Sapiens. Before us, the living humans, there were lots of species of humans. But then, as the time passed, due to certain environmental changes, only we managed to survive. Binomial nomenclature by Carl Linnaeus, I'm sorry. So, coming straight to the point, it consists of, sorry, it consists of two parts. First name is genus and the second species. Because in same genus there may be many species. For example, in the genus Panthera, there are both tiger and lion. So, lion is Panthera leo, while tiger is Panthera tigris. The species name is different. All identified organisms have been assigned a binomial name as per the guidelines of International Code of Nomenclature. Okay? All the organisms of a species are so similar that irrespective of the differences in all these parameters, they can reproduce among themselves and form new individuals like themselves. For example, only similar species can reproduce. We cannot reproduce with a mosquito because the species is different. For example, all domestic cats in the world belong to the same species. This is true in the case of animals and plants. Okay, so you can see the one of the scientific name. Thank you.